Actually, let's get a nice before image.
I just started. Alright, let's go again.
What's up, guys? So a lot of you guys watching this right now might be new to the channel. What we've been doing is an SR20DET blacktop swap in a Z32 Fairlady Z. Now the swap doesn't really vary much, being right-hand drive versus left-hand drive. It's been a very fun experience, very simple experience. It's been very easy, very smooth. It's taken us about a little over a month to get done, including paint, which is sick. So what we're going to be doing today is doing a full cost analysis breakdown on what it takes to swap a SR20 into a Z32. Now the way I'll be doing it today is aiming more towards the necessities more than things you might want to upgrade later on. We're going to be doing the things that it takes just to get a stock SR20 in the car running and driving so you can enjoy it. And just like anything else from there is many upgrades you could do in the future to make it perform better, smoother, faster, all that good stuff. But for now, I'm gonna tell you guys exactly what you need and how much it's gonna cost to get an SR20 in a Z32. So far, the experience has been very easy and very cost effective. If you guys wanna go back and watch the videos of the swap, basically filmed every aspect of it throughout the past month. So the previous month videos is gonna be all about the Z32. But before we get started, I wanna make a big point about what makes this swap very affordable to a lot of guys. Now, SR20 swaps have been around, very plentiful in 240s for quite a long time now. So with this swap, it utilizes a ton of 240 parts. So being able to get used parts from people who have either given up on their build or just parting it out will save you a ton of money, and you'll be able to do the swap for very, very, very cheap. But I'll be going through telling you new prices. When of course everyone knows used prices will probably be a third, if not lower, of new prices. So keep that in mind. Let's get started. What we're gonna be doing is I'm gonna be giving a full price breakdown on SR swapping a Z32. Because usually when it comes to engine swaps, the big question is how much it's going to cost. That's a really, really big factor in determining if you want to do a swap on the engine. I have RJ here for moral support. He'll be playing video games. So I guess let's just get into it. But the way I like to do engine swaps is I like to break down each category and go from there. It makes it a lot easier. It's a lot less overwhelming than trying to take it all on at once. So that being said, I guess let's just start with the engine itself. But SR20DETs, depending on what model you get, red top, black top, slant top, S15 slant top, doesn't matter. They all range in between around $2,000 to about $3,800, depending on where you get it. I've learned that it's a lot cheaper to basically find someone who gave up on a SR20 swap in a 240 and basically just buy the project, take the motor and sell off the rest of the stuff. It's probably your best way to get a SR20 for the best price. You can get an SR20 from a JDM engine depot like I did, and they're usually around $26,000 to $3,000 for the whole drop-in. And what that comes with is all the accessories, usually the turbo, the transmission, and the wire harness and the ECU. That's nice because you do get a lot of parts that you need for the swap.
It is nice just picking it up from somebody who's over it, because they're either frustrated or disappointed, and they're just looking to unload that stuff.
Exactly.
So you get a good deal.
I'll be sharing a lot of ISR parts. I just feel they're basically the best bang for the buck in terms of cheap price, because going much cheaper than the ISR stuff, you're just losing quality. ISR definitely has the best quality per dollar, which I believe so. So I'll be basing a lot of my prices off the ISR stuff. So your first obstacle when swapping the SR is getting the SR into the car. Now that's going to start off at the mounts. Now there's a gentleman named Jonathan Brops. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry, John, if I butchered it, but he actually makes a custom set of mounts for this. He did this swap years ago, and he happened to design up a very, very nice set of machined aluminum mounts that allow you to basically just bolt it right in. It makes your life a lot easier. I'll put the link to the Facebook page that he runs, and you can actually message him and get a set for yourself. Those will run you about $350. It's not bad for the quality of what you're getting and the ease of use. You could always make your own, save yourself the money, but you might waste a lot of time and effort doing so. With those mounts, you actually cannot use like an aftermarket single pin style engine mount, which a lot of guys do because they're cheap, just a solid chunk of poly. You're going to have to utilize the OEM mounts or the OEM styling mounts because they actually have 2 bolts on them to basically help center the mount. With that, you could either go OEM, which usually ranges from anywhere from $80 to $150, or you can go with Nismo mounts, where it's a little bit stiffer, which I don't think you need. The Nismo mounts are actually pretty harsh, and those will run you about $300. So those are expensive. So a good part about the Z32 chassis, which makes the SR swap a little bit easier, is you could actually use your Z32 transmission. By utilizing the Z32 transmission, you can essentially keep everything stock behind the transmission, makes your life a lot easier and saves a lot of money. Stock shifter location, stock drive shaft, all that good stuff. And the Z32 transmission, very similar to the SR, just way stronger. To make that work, you actually have to use an adapter plate from the Z32 transmission to the SR20DET. Now MazWorks makes this adapter plate, and it sells for about $375. I actually found a company on eBay that basically cloned their adapter plate, and it was $250 shipped with hardware. I'll put the link below. I use it for my swap, and it seems to be performing perfectly fine. Now with that, you're gonna have to get your bells and machines, which I was fortunate to have a buddy that happens to have a Bridgeport, and if you guys had that too, buy him a case of beer. If not, it'll probably cost you anywhere from $80 to $150 to get that done. And to marry that up to the transmission, get it all bolted together, I'd say you need about a tube of RTV and a few OEM gaskets that'll run you about $35. Now with that adapter, you could actually use an SR20 flywheel and clutch, which makes your life a lot easier. Say your motor came with a flywheel, paid 20 bucks to get it resurfaced. You could buy yourself an eBay clutch for about $120, or you can go with a simple competition clutch that will run you anywhere from $250 to $450. You guys can decide on that one. With that stuff, your SR20 is in your car, married to the transmission, bolted up, your whole drivetrain is connected. You could always, of course, upgrade to a short throw shifter, 1-piece drive shaft, better clutch, lightweight flywheel, all that stuff, but it's not a necessity. First system we're going to start off with is fuel. Fuel is really easy. On the Z32 chassis, the fuel lines actually run on the driver's side frame rail up on through the engine bay. On an SR20, it actually needs the fuel delivered on the opposite side. So what you could do, you could either run fuel lines all the way over your engine, over your exhaust manifold, whatever. Don't recommend it. Or what I did was I actually unbolted the fuel lines from the frame rail and moved them to the other frame rail on the passenger side and just run new lines from the tank to the hard lines, and you're all set. So once the hard lines moved over to the other side of the car, all you have to do is buy some high pressure soft line and run new lines from the tank to the hard lines, which actually I was able to reuse the ones in the back because they were long enough and just get new lines for the front that runs to the stock SR20 fuel rail. You might want to run a new filter, but you could use a Z32 filter. That's basically free, which is sick. And another good thing about that too is that Z32 fuel pump actually delivers plenty of fuel to work on a stock SR20. Next we have the coolant system. This is also very easy. So when it comes to our coolant system, first thing we're going to look at is the heater hose lines. Now there's 2 main pipes that run underneath the intake manifold of the SR20. You could essentially cut those underneath the intake and run 2 lines from those to the heater hose outlets, which is really easy. The only thing that you're going to spend money on is some generic hose from like AutoZone or Advanced. You spend about $60 on that and some hose clamps and you should be all set. Actually lines up pretty good. But if you do that, there's actually a coolant line that goes from those pipes to the turbo, so you're gonna have to relocate that. ISR sells a water neck that actually has an AN fitting tapped already into it. It's about $70. It makes your life a lot easier. You could tap a fitting into that and then run your water line that used to go to the back of the head, now to the water neck. Nice and easy. From that, you're going to need a radiator and some fans. Now, there's not enough room to run a SR20 clutch fan, so you're going to have to get some electric fans. But you can use a 240 radiator and fans and hoses, which is sick. So if you go online, you can get hoses for cheap. ISR actually sells a kit that has fans, radiator, and hoses in it for $300. I think that's a very fair price, and that's pretty cheap, and that'll get you going. That's all you need to complete your coolant system. All right, going on from coolant, we're gonna go to the exhaust now. So for your exhaust, you don't have to do a full custom exhaust. I did just for the hell of it, but you're able to utilize a 240SX SR20 turbo elbow and a 300ZX catback. Now you could do a single exit or dual exit. Single exit is easier because all you have to essentially do is take a 300ZX catback, take off one side of complete piping, and you've got most of your exhaust right there. All you have to do is basically make a pipe that connects your turbo elbow to your catback, which is very easy to make. You could also buy a 240SX downpipe and mod that to connect the turbo elbow to the 300ZX catback. Now a nice 240X turbo elbow, you can get one on eBay for $100. ISR sells a really nice cast stainless one that I liked. It was $170. Cheap 300ZX catback, a Megan Racing one will run you about $170, and a cheap downpipe will be about $70. And you can mod that all together with very minimal work and get yourself a complete exhaust. Very easy. Next is the intercooler and intake system. Just like a lot of other parts on the swap, we could basically utilize a full 240 kit, which is really sick because one, like I've been saying, they're super abundant. You can buy a used one for super cheap, and two, there's a million companies that make them. Looking at some online prices, they have a CX Racing kit that's about $300, or the ISR kit's about $400. I've been told, though personally I did not do this, I've been told that the 240 kits actually mock up on the Z's pretty well. You can get away with it with minimal modding. I did a custom intercooler kit mainly because I wanted to run like a mid-mount style intercooler, which allows you to run shorter piping. Like I said, you can run a 240 kit very, very easily. The intake, I believe you can use a stock SR20 intake, make it work. It might fit a little bulky. You could always make yourself one very easily using a few couplers and some straights. That is no biggie. That might cost you $40 in couplers to make that work. We now have our power steering system. This one is also very, very easy. All you need to do is basically convert your system to 240SX power steering lines and reservoir. Since the stock 240 line works on an SR20 and the Z32 stuff is basically on the opposite side, you need to convert all to 240 lines, which you could either buy yourself a full chase base kit, which would run you about $300, or you can find a 240 part out and get everything for probably a solid $40, if that. So that's super easy. You could save yourself a lot of money by just using stock 240 stuff. So the 240 lines bolt directly to the Z32 rack, the fittings at least. You might want to change the placement of the reservoir slightly, maybe move behind the strut tower, make yourself a little bit easier, but you should be able to use all stock 240 lines. Now moving on to a big one that might intimidate a lot of people is the wiring harness. So the wiring harness in terms of price is going to be very, very cheap. In terms of effort, very, very easy also. So there are two main harnesses on the Z32. There is the engine harness and then there's the transmission harness. The transmission harness will essentially have your transmission sensors, it'll have your starter, trigger wire, and it'll have your alternator plugs. Since the starter and alternator are on the exact same side as the SRs and the VG, you could use the stock 300ZX trans harness, which is really, really easy. Even the alternator plug plugs right in, that's it. You could reuse that, your life is really easy. Now for the engine harness, what you're going to want to get is a stock SR20 harness. Now stock SR20s harnesses are very, very cheap because not a lot of people use them. So you could usually find them online anywhere from $50 to $150. At least around here I know they're super easy to get. From there it takes very, very minimal effort to mod it to make it work with the Z chassis. There's a really good write-up on the Z32 page that I was telling you about before, ran by Jonathan, on how to make it work, and of course that'll be in the description. Realistically, what you're gonna have to do is spend about $20 on electrical tape and maybe spend about $20 on some wire loom too to make it look nice, and your wire harness should be done. So that saves you a lot of money there because a custom swap harness can run you anywhere from $500 to $1,200. So easy enough. Now the last thing I have on the list is gauges. With the SR20, you're going to want an AFR gauge. You want to know what your SR20 is throwing down. I suggest that an AM AFR gauge is going to run you about $160. It'll do the job. It works great. It'll get it done. On top of that, you're probably going to want an aftermarket temperature sensor, boost gauge, and maybe even an oil pressure sensor. Those will probably run you anywhere from $60 going with some cheap gauges all the way up to, $600 if you're going with like AEM or something. So that that's about it. That will get an SR20 in your Z32. Like I said before, this swap could cost you a lot of money or it can cost you very little, depending on how hard you want to go with your SR20.
I did high side too, so when you said stuff that ranges from anywhere, I said the high side for that. So that could be, that's high side.
Alright, so if RJ did the math right,
probably,
which he probably didn't, but he said he added the high value that I was giving off throughout the numbers, comes out to about a little over $5,000, which for an engine swap is dirt cheap. Engine swaps, I don't care, unless you've done one before, you don't know how expensive they do add up to be. On top of this $5,000, you're gonna want to add about $400 on random stuff, because that's just what happens. You're gonna want to. Damn, you're going hard. I didn't count for refreshing your SR. I'm taking into consideration that your SR is fresh. You might want to regasket a few things, put a new thermostat in, do a valve cover gasket, do some general maintenance, but always calculate for a couple extra $100 on top of that. So when it comes down to it, it's a very, very easy, very, very inexpensive engine swap for a chassis that I think is really worth it, especially these days that Z32 chassis have dropped in value quite a bit, and trying to find a rear-wheel drive chassis for an affordable price is pretty hard. So I think this will offer many people an option to get into a Z32 chassis. Yeah, that's about it. There's nothing really much to it. It's a very simple swap. Like I said, you could utilize a lot of 240 parts to make it fit. It's an easy motor, it's tiny, it makes your life a lot easier having it in there. It's super easy to get to everything. Though the engine bay isn't that long, it's very wide. It makes the turbo manifolds and everything, and the intake manifolds very accessible. And of course, there's always upgrades in the future, and make it more powerful, make it more fun, and do all that good stuff. So I hope you guys are thinking about doing the SR20 swap in a Z32 because it's very fun and you'll have a good time doing it. So that's about it, RJ, right? That's about it.
I think so.
There you go. I hope you guys liked my video, and good luck on your SR20 DET Z32 swap.